It's time for Constitutionally Speaking, and this is established in partnership with our friends at the Office of the Public Defender. The Deputy Public Defender is going to be my guest and will be on in a few seconds. Well-known attorney at law, Mr. Herbert McKenzie. And we have come to a consensus that today we'll be looking at, continuing in fact, to look at crimes in international armed conflicts. And today in particular, we want to continue the conversation looking at things like crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression. Do you know about war crimes? Well, all of that information you'll be getting right here this morning. Good morning and welcome, Mr. McKenzie. How are you doing today?
Good morning, sir. Fine, thank you. You?
Not too bad at all. Looking forward to this morning's program.
Good. So we just start crimes against humanity. Last week we touched on things like genocide, and we briefly mentioned the International Criminal Court.
Yes.
It's a permanent court in the United Nations which tries people who are accused of these crimes that are committed during armed conflict. So we'll pick up this morning by looking at the other category called crimes against humanity.
Mm-hmm.
So crime against humanity is that type of crimes which include widespread or systemic criminal acts committed by or on behalf of a state or any other authority against a civilian population. It is that sort of crime that grossly violates human rights and dignity and runs against everything that international law stands for. Example of those: murder, rape, torture, enforced disappearance, and, if people recall, Agustin Pinochet of Argentina was once accused of disappearing hundreds, if not thousands of people. Enslavement and persecution.
Yes.
To this extent, crimes against humanity overlap with general war crimes. The distinction, though, between crimes against humanity and war crimes is that crime against humanity can be committed during both wartime and peacetime. Now, war crimes, as the name implies, are committed only in wartime. Mm-hmm. And I don't think anybody would disagree with me if I give an example of crime against humanity as slavery. In my view, it's the biggest crime against humanity in our human history.
Agreed.
Yep, that's my view. And the crime against humanity continues to be committed all over the world today. Part of the issue is that not many people are brought to books. And not many people are brought to books because quite a number of powerful states do not subscribe or do not support the International Criminal Court. For reason being that they don't want to find one of their nationals ending up before that court for any of these crimes that are committed.
I really am happy that you're addressing that, because I wanted to have asked you whether or not there are any legal mechanisms in place to hold leaders or individuals accountable for these crimes against humanity, and why are so many still going unpunished?
All right, well, let's answer that before we go on. These sort of crimes, firstly, they can be tried. The persons accused of them can be tried in their domestic court or in the International Criminal Court. Now, in the domestic court, almost always they are not tried because most of the times the persons responsible for them are either the state-sponsored persons, the state itself, or somebody affiliated to leadership. Now, you can see why the leadership or the apparatus of the state itself will not prosecute its agent for what other people allege to be crime against humanity. Mm-hmm. So almost always the state is not going to institute it. Secondly, the International Criminal Court, its jurisdiction is limited. So, for example, United States, China, and Russia do not subscribe to the International Criminal Court. So you'll never see a person like Putin, Donald Trump, or Netanyahu be before the International Criminal Court, no matter what they do. And if you recall, some time ago, the prosecutor at the ICC issued a warrant for Putin and one for Netanyahu, and I think one for the Hamas leader. What has become of that? So nobody's going to arrest them. They don't subscribe to the court. They don't recognize the court jurisdiction. So it is not always likely that you are going to get them before the court. The sad thing about it is that quite a number of people who have come before the court for war crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, are really leaders from third world, leaders from African countries, and leaders from countries that are not regarded as great powers. That's a part of the hypocrisy and the political imbalance that exists in today's universe. So, I hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does.
So, war crime, no. This is a deliberate violation of the laws of war. It gives rise to individual criminal liability. Now, war crimes can be committed internally as well as can be committed during an international armed conflict. So you might have a civil war, internal strife. War crime can be committed within that internal strife. And obviously, during an international armed conflict, one state against another. But a war crimes are committed always in the context of the conflict, never in peacetime. Now, and unlike genocide, war crimes and crimes against humanity can be committed against a variety of victims. We know genocide is usually against a ethnic, religious, or people of distinct groups. The war crimes and crime against humanity can be committed against any sort of victim, whether they be combatants or non-combatants. And the same question you might ask for crimes against crime against humanity,
yes.
You might ask with respect to war crimes, and the answer is the same. Usually the national of the perpetrator is reluctant to, and in some cases cannot. Let's look, for example, at Haiti. This guy they call Barbecue.
Barbecue, yes. Gangster.
Yes. You could see why Haiti, even if they wanted to, is unable to go against it because he's probably de facto a leader in some quarters in Haiti. So, that sort of answers the question why it's hard to get these people before the court. I mean, if you're an African leader or you're a third world leader, very quickly you're before the International Criminal Court. Now, war crimes include willful killing, murder, taking of hostages, torture, directing attacks against buildings dedicated to religion, education, charitable purposes, historical monuments, includes unlawful deportation, mutilation, and deliberate and extended destruction of property not justified by military necessity. Sounds to me like some of the things that goes on in Gaza at the hand of the Israeli forces. Remember also, we have news coming out of Israel, which has not been contradicted, that the Israeli forces have attacked hospital in Gaza, for example, deliberately. So a hospital, I hardly think anybody can disagree when they say that a hospital is a building designed for charitable purposes. And if you attack a building designed for charitable purpose without any justification, then that in itself amounts to a war crime. Now let's look at crime of aggression.
Yes.
That's another category of the crimes committed in armed conflict. It is also called crime against peace. Under the Rome Statute, that is this treaty that has created the ICC, crime of aggression or crime against peace is regarded as the planning, preparation, initiation, or the execution by a person in a position to exercise control or to direct political or military action of a state and to use that military to invade or to attack the territory of another state. So, for example, it is said that the Israeli invasion of the Gaza amounts to a crime against aggression. Of course, that is as controversial as the definition itself. And some persons regard a military campaign as a lawful war or preemptive self-defense may find themselves being criticized for committing crime of aggression, while they see it as a preemptive strike, as a form of self-defense, and has nothing to do with any crime committed in any armed conflict. Some of the acts that they regard as crime of aggression include invasion. Remember in 1983, the United States led a team made up of CARICOM members into Grenada, or the Grenada invasion, that in some quarters regards as a crime of aggression, as Grenada, it was at the time, did nothing toward the United States for that invasion. I mean, CARICOM was a part of it, and CARICOM felt that there was an incursion of socialist ideology in their neighbor. Then there's military occupation. Then annexation by use of force and blockades of ports. These start of crime of aggression, we see them today in the two major conflicts. They are parts of Ukraine that Russia has annexed. They have annexed Crimea in 2014, and there are now some parts of eastern Ukraine that they have actually controlled and are saying that they are going to be annexed. In terms of military occupation, we now know that Israel is thinking of going back to occupy the Gaza area. Mm-hmm. In fact, they want to take control of it. The U.S. president said they want to make it some sort of a Middle East resort or some such term which have this touristy thing about it.
But I wanted to ask you, though, Mr. Mack, I mean, is it that the International Criminal Court is powerless to hold state leaders accountable even for these crimes of aggression?
To answer your question this way, the International Criminal Court, while it has international jurisdiction, by virtue of the principle of universal jurisdiction, a principle in law, it gets cases come before it in three ways. One, a state who is a member of the organization, of the ICC court, and by the way, it's 124 members so far. Ukraine is seeking to join it to make it 125. Any one of those 24 member states can refer a case to the ICC, even whether or not the crime itself is taken within their territory. So that's one way of getting before the ICC. Another way of getting it before the ICC is the court, it on its own initiative, can investigate individuals and bring them up before it. And thirdly, the UN Security Council can refer a situation occurring anywhere in the world before the ICC. No, the ICC would have been seized of jurisdiction by any of those methods. The only issue then is to get that individual before the ICC physically. Because if, for example, a leader by the name of President Bloggin were to be referred or to be prosecuted by any of the three means, Bloggins can decide to take refuge within his own state, within his territorial borders, and you'll never get him before the ICC in Hague. It may issue a warrant for him, and any member state rejects it, they want to execute the warrant on him. They can accept that some of the member states won't because of other political and economic reasons. So while the ICC has jurisdiction, they can exercise the jurisdiction, but the second leg of it is to get that individual who is accused of the crime to actually stand before them in that hall in The Hague and get evidence against him or her. If you remember, slight digress, although this is not it was the ICC one, Adolf Eichmann, that German military leader who in the Holocaust time was responsible for the death of millions of Jews. For years, that the Jews, the Israelis, have been tracking him. And they actually got him. And now they actually got him before the Israeli local court was actually a capture. He was hiding all over the place. When they snatched him, I think he was in Brazil hiding. When they snatched him and the authorities was heartbreaking, realized he was actually in the cockpit of a fast jet, tucked away at the back, with a pilot flying at about twice the speed of sound across the Atlantic to get him back into Tel Aviv. So if the individual is not before the court, despite the jurisdiction of a court, the court cannot try them because the ICC prosecutes individuals who are liable, not like the ICJ, which goes against states in civil proceedings.
Understood.
So that is the reason why the ICC, while it has the power on paper, in some instances, practical the power, it can't be exercised.
Understood, yes.
almost sometimes like a bulldog without teeth. You want to put that
Yes.
that metaphor. No, one of the most controversial conflict giving rise to assertion of prime aggression was the Israeli War of 1967, and it seems as if what the military thinkers and the writers are saying, this 12-day war of 2025 might fall in that category. That was a war fought between the 5th and the 10th of June. Some people call it the June War. Some people call it the Third Arab-Israeli War. And some people in that area call it the Nakash. And it was a strike by Israel on its Arab neighbors. Out of what Israeli official position was, a need for self-defense as a preemptive strike, and what the Arabs refer to as a planning by Israel to annihilate them. It was one of the most decisive victories in military warfare at the time, and it was very consequential to the Middle East. Arguably, it may be the source of some of what's going on now, because it ended with Israel capturing the Sinai Peninsula. You will remember that was returned through the Camp David Accords.
Yes.
They actually captured the Golan Heights, which they annexation, and they captured the Gaza Strip, which is placed under Israeli military occupation. And of course, the West Bank also captured, occupied, and eventually annexed. All those annexations, International Criminal Court would have regarded them as part of the crimes committed in the international armed conflicts.
Yes.
Time is upon us, more and none. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this this morning. We learned a lot and we appreciate it. Thanks, Mr. Mack. Have a good day.